Man, what an awesome crowd to be with this morning. I thought about just giving my speech in Gwich'in, but then I thought I'll only be talking to about 4 of you. So when I go and I work a lot with young people, and I always start out talking with them in my language, and they always look at me really confused, and then after a while I'll switch over and I say, don't worry about it, I speak English too. And they're always good to hear that. They're always happy to hear that. Man, I feel like it's been a long time coming for me to arrive at this moment to be here with all of you in this particular gathering. You know, over the years, of course, I hear about it, and there's been several years that I've been wanting to come to make it here to be with many of you who I know have been coming for many years. I think this morning I heard Ann say it was 31 years. I'm barely older than that. So I would have been pretty young had I been around during that first time. And it's kind of fitting, too, for today to be the day that we're having the World Providers here for me. You know, you heard a little bit about some of the work that I do, but I want to tell you a little bit of the story just of my last week that resulted in me arriving here. It was probably not unlike a lot of the work that you all have been doing across our communities for many more years than me. You see, I was running this camp we call Camp Begaye. That's an Inupiaq word, and I'm Gwich'in. And in fact, the Inupiaq and the Gwich'in were historical enemies. There's a lot of stories, that I heard over the years. On the Gwich'in side, we won all the battles. On the Inupiaq side, they won all the battles. It just depends on which elders you're listening to. And so I never respond when I hear the war stories. I just sit back and I listen to them. I just think, all right, we always kind of tell the best story for ourselves, I think. And but the Inupiaq people invited me 4 years ago to begin working among their people to help try to address this issue of suicide among their young people, especially young men, 14 to 24 years old. And so when they invited me out there to do work, they said, we know that you're a leader among your own people in the interior, and that it's a big deal for us to be asking you to put time into our people and into our villages. And when I heard them talk to me like that, it was a group of elders and then a couple of the boards of their organizations, I felt that it was the right thing for me to do, and so I accepted to begin doing that work out there among the Inupiaq people. Man, it's funny, over the years, I learned how to run around on icebergs way out in the ocean and throw harpoons at big seals, big animals, like 1,000-pound, they call it ugruk. A few years ago, I got my first one myself. It was like getting my first big animal all over again, but from the ocean. And we went through the whole ceremony of receiving that first animal like that with me. And I was able to gut it, skin it, hang, make dry meat. They call it black meat. And I even was able to cut off the blubber and render my own seal oil. Any of you guys like that kind of stuff? I got a couple of jars left in my freezer over in my house still. So I've really enjoyed the years that I've got to live among and be there with the Inupiaq people, the kindness and the love that they showed me, the support that they offered for me to be able to design and implement programs as I would want them to be designed, and the vision that I had for trying to bring wellness and healing to not only their people, but to many of our people. And so that's where I've been for a few years doing a lot of work out there. So just this last week, I show up there in Kotzebue on Sunday, and it's the first time that I wasn't there ahead of time before one of our culture camps. We always make those camps go in alignment with the season so that we could be teaching subsistence activities, because a lot of our young people these days aren't being brought out or don't have the opportunities to be brought out in the land and learn how to provide for themselves, to instill some of those strong self-esteem in them as young people. And so we're providing an environment where they're being supported, talked to, encouraged to share what they're going through, and we're providing them with knowledge and skill based on the culture, the way of life of our people. And I got up there on Sunday late because I was running another retreat that I'll talk to you about in a second, just outside of Fairbanks, that a few people here helped me with too. And when I got there on Sunday night, the youth were supposed to come in Monday morning from the villages, and the first news I got was a storm took out our camp completely. We had built what we call it Keynote in Gwich'in, but they call it makivik over there. It's like a sweat house or a sweat lodge, I guess is what they would call it down in Lower 48. And we had built one out of wood We had put up all of our tent frames. We had built a camp on this place that they call Riley Wreck. It's about 10 miles south on the coast from Kotzebue. And I find out Sunday night that a storm had come in and wiped out our whole camp clean. We had no camp to go to, and the youth were going to come in Monday morning. On top of that, I found out that one of our boats was taken by one of the villages last fall, and that they weren't going to be able to bring it back to us in time. Our backup boat, the control box, broke down. And then huge floes of ice just blocked in the whole coast so that a boat couldn't even go anyways. And I'll tell you, I put my team through a lot of adjustments. So in real quick time, we had to make major decisions on what we were going to do. So first thing is we needed to find a new place to camp, because we weren't going to be able to make it down to Riley Wreck. It's out there, you know. There's no buildings, no facilities. Like, it's survival like our ancestors lived. One of the years previous that we were doing that, you know, we were hauling fresh water off the frozen ocean. Some of you guys might not know that you could do that, but if you know how, you could do that, and that's how we survived. We were hauling fresh water off the frozen ocean, and then we were looking back. We had no motorized anything except for chainsaw. And we seen caribou back up on the hills, and we took youth and we hiked way back 5 miles around because the wind was blowing down this way, so we can come back around up this way, and we got caribou, and then we packed them all the way back, miles back to our camp. We built dry meat rack. We hung our dry meat. I cut up that caribou head and made them caribou head soup. It's the first time that most of them had ever had it. And that elder said, "Can I take back the rest of this to my house after the camp's over?" She was happy to have it. And so anyways, that's the kind of camp that we have. So we had to come up with a new location. We had to delay the youth coming in by 1 day. We had to come up with a control box, which is pretty tough, as most of you guys know, in rural Alaska, to come up with some of these parts last minute. And then we decided to go ahead and design a whole new, what they call Inusuck, which is the meat drying rack, and a whole new Makivik. And so we designed a whole new one. We gathered all the lumber. We found a guy in Kotzebue who had a control box that he was willing to sell to us. So we went to work getting it all together. And we made it out to camp. And that first night, it was freezing cold, like literally freezing cold, below freezing. And some of those people, it was their first time camping that kind of weather. You know, you could see her breath in the tent. And there was one non-native guy that we brought up from the lower 48. And at the end of the camp, we were doing our closing comments, and he said, "I'll be honest with you guys, after that first night, I just wanted to jump on the closest boat and head back over to Kotzebue." And but he stuck it out, you know, and he learned. And he said he's a graduate student in college, and after being there with 1 week for us on the land, he said he learned more in that 1 week than he did in 8 months of college. And I saw that transformation happen. I was watching him. That first day, I gave him the responsibility of just putting up a simple plastic tent with some youth. And I watched for an hour. and he didn't even touch the thing till the very end. He just clipped on one little tarp. He just sat there kind of watching those youth, you know, trying to figure it out. And man, it was good stuff. And I wrestled in me. You know, this is the challenge we go through as we get older, I think, as Native people. Because I wanted to go over there and tell him how to do it. I wanted to go over there and tell that guy, "Hey, look, you got to put your hands on this thing. That's how you learn." But then I told myself, just be patient. Just let him go at his own speed to learn and grow. And I think that's the way it is with a lot of the work that we do in this field with people. Anyhow, I watched what could be accomplished by a group of people who are passionate, who care, who are dedicated to supporting our people to heal and recover and grow strong. We are able to build a 20-foot by 8-foot full 2x4 construction sweat with the entrance changing area. We put up a huge Inusuck that was probably maybe 14 by 14, had tons of poles up through it, had a roof over it. We had a 14-year-old boy get his first ugruk. It was an 8.5-foot long, over 1,000-pound bearded seal. We got 2 other ugruks. We processed all those. By the end of our camp, we were taking sweats every night, talking with the young people, doing talking circles. They were sharing what they were going through, what they were carrying inside. A lot of tears were shed, even by the adults that were there. We had meat. Our meat rack was filled with meat hanging. We had tons of 5-gallon buckets filled with blubber rendering into seal oil. And you know, once again in my life, I was able to bear witness to what the capacity really is of our people when we come together and work together. But I can tell you, for every adult that's been involved in that program in particular over the years, we're not there because it's a job for us. I'm telling you, they would have run away a long time ago with what I put a lot of my leadership teams through. You know, they're there because they believe in what it is that we're doing. And I think that that's something that is critical in this work, is that we see this bigger long-term vision of where we're trying to go and where we're trying to head with the healing of our people, with the well-being of our people, with the self-determination of our people. When we have clarity around that vision, then we know where we're headed and how all these steps and stages that we go through and the work that we do fits into that bigger picture. At the end of the camp, I had been away from my family for about 2 weeks. I knew my daughter was really missing me because my wife was texting me when I got back to Kotzebue, and she said I have 4 kids, and my 7-year-old is probably the most sensitive. And she's like intuitive. She's always been a kind of a healer person herself. She actually reminds me of myself. Like even on the soccer field, anyone falls down or gets hurt, she'll quit playing and go over them and start trying to help them and make sure that they're okay. Even if they just get just a little bit of a ball hit on the side of their belly or anything. But that one, you know, was pretty sensitive, and she was saying that she needed her dad to be back around her. And I think that's one of the challenges, you know, of this work too, especially for those of us who are in the era of raising our family when our kids are still young and at home, is making sure that our partners and our children know how much we love them and how much we're there for them. And so anyways, so I got word of that, and I was supposed to fly out 6 p.m. the next Sunday to make it back here midnight. Yesterday? Yeah. And I get back early on the first boat from camp. Real choppy water. Man, when we were coming into Kotzebue, the swells were like 4-foot waves, and we were in not that big of a boat. And I was just thinking, I was holding my backpack that had my camera and my laptop in it. A lot of valuable information in there. And I was thinking, man, if this boat goes over, I'm going to be treading water, holding that backpack up, you know, trying to make sure that thing doesn't drop. And which wouldn't have worked, of course, because it would have been just make it to shore time. But those waves were so big, and you know, I had a few moments of being pretty nervous about what was going on because the waves were starting to break right over the bow of the boat, and but we made it. But the other folks decided to wait out because the weather was a little bit intense. And so here we're waiting. I'm supposed to check in for my flight at 6 p.m. 5 o'clock comes around. Luckily, one boat made it with gear, so I was able to put some of the gear away. But none of the youth and none of my leaders were able to make it back to the ground yet, back to COTS. And I was sitting there with this dilemma. 5 p.m., man, beads of sweat were rolling down my head because we already had a stressful week. Like I told you, we had to make all these adjustments, right? And then I had to decide, am I going to go jump on a plane? And when my team and all the youth show up, I'm on a plane flying away. And I'm the driver to help load all the gear back to put it away for the next year's camp. And I just realized that at that moment, you know, I had to prioritize my family and my kids because I'd been away from them for so long, because this was a second week-long program I had just run. And so I quickly called around COTS. I found a therapist who I'd worked with for a long time, really trusted her. I said, I need a big favor from you. I said, you need to replace me to finish off the wrapping up of this camp. And she said, absolutely. You need to get back to your family. You need a break. I know that. I've seen you work for years. And so she came on, took the vehicle from me, dropped me off at the airport. And as I was boarding my plane, sure enough, I get a phone call. And it was one of my camp leaders. And I answered my phone, and I said, hey. He's like, where are you at? I said, I'm boarding the plane. And I already know that he was mad at me as soon as I said that. And I said, but I got someone else. She's going to take care of you guys. She's going to get all the youth to where they need to go, either to their home or over to check into this hotel they called Ludwig, and get them out the next morning. And I already had paid for dinner for everybody, big pizza party type of thing, so the youth could settle down and enjoy their time with each other. So I'm sharing that story, you know, of just this past camp, because that's some of the challenges that we face in this work. And over the years, I've learned the importance of having clear boundaries of what we're doing, making sure we're taking care of ourselves, but being flexible and adaptable to the situations and the moments that we face in life. And that was the gift that our ancestors, one of many gifts I think that our ancestors left there for us, is just like, when we finally got to that new camp and it was freezing cold, a lot of people didn't sleep much that night because how cold it was at camp, but that next morning we cleaned up the land, it looked like a good camp. We had a good breakfast together, and we sat around in a circle inside of the one canvas tent we had with the wood stove, and we all squeezed in that canvas tent, and we were in a circle, about 20 of us, that's how many we had out at the camp. And I told them, this is nothing compared to what our ancestors went through. Storms would come, wipe out camps, wipe out, areas, animals would come or not come, ice would come or not come, strong winds, cold weather would come, and our people were able to survive. And so, we looked around, we were sitting in a canvas tent with a wood stove, got a bunch of food stored away, more than enough to survive for the time we were at camp, and I said, we're in good shape. And now I'm here with you guys. I want to spend a little time to tell another story, actually. Some of you in here, I'll just say this. Well, first of all, a lot of people don't know, but I can't see further than about 10 or 15 feet in front of me. I've had a major condition with my eyes. I think they call it optical neuropathy. It means my optical lens from my eye to my brain, they told me recently it's only 1% the thickness of the average human. The first 3 eye doctors who saw me, they told me it was amazing that I even have vision at all. They said they'd never seen someone with such a thin optical nerve that could still see. And so all of you are just really blurry to me, so it kind of makes it easier to be standing in front of you and speaking. A lot of colors, though, I see, which is a cool thing. And I've had that condition my whole life, but I don't really talk about it much. But I say it now because recently, more than ever before in my life, I get word through secondhand from someone, they say, hey, so-and-so was really offended. You were walking through the airport and they waved to you, and they hadn't seen you for 2 years, and all you did was smile and wave back at them, and you just kept walking by. And I had to explain to them, well, if they would have been close enough for me to recognize who they were, I would have given them a hug and said hello. I said, but so many people just wave and smile and say hi to me. I just do that back because I'm a friendly person. And if I don't know who it is, then I can't respond that way. And so I guess it's good that I finally just communicated in a public forum like this where it's recorded, so people can say, oh, that's why he's not able to come over and see people sometimes. But how did I get talking about my eyes? My story, how I came to be here with all of you. I want to tell you a little bit about it. And now I remember why I got to the eyes. It's because some of you I've known for years that are in the crowd. I see some people I've known since they were like 12, 13 years old out here. All of you that are like 50 plus are scratching your head. How could you know when you're 13? No, the younger ones. And some of you I've known since I was that young or younger. And a lot of you that are in this room have influenced me in real positive ways over the years. One of the things that I've always tried to do in my life is try to be perceptive of what's going on around me, how people are carrying themselves, how people speak, and the decisions that they're making. And I'll tell you right now, a lot of you in this room I've learned a lot from over the years, and I want to thank you for that. My path wasn't an easy path. I grew up without a father. My mother was, I was just saying the other day, I was like, man, we might need to start a new thing called the adult children of the boarding school generation. But I grew up in that generation where most of our parents, I can actually use the word most, and it's a sad thing, had heavy addiction to alcohol and drugs, substance abuse. There was a lot of neglect. A lot of people in my generation, and maybe a little bit older, we basically raised ourselves. we had to decide for ourselves what it meant to be a man or a woman and how we were going to live in this world. A lot of the subsistence activities, we picked up a little bit here and there from people, but even a lot of that we taught to ourselves by going out in the land and just doing it, and that's the way we learn. Later, I had real good guidance from people like Chief David Salmon, and he told me, well, that's the way our people always did it. You want to learn how to live off the land, you want to learn your language, then you just go out there and do it. You go after it. He said, you learn, you know. I remember one of the first times I was bringing home caribou up in Arctic Village, and I went to one of our elders and I said, I don't know if I did it right. And he went out and he looked at my sled, and you know, there's legs and ribs and everything. Everything was wrapped up in the hide and it was tied down to my sled. And he looked at it and he said, you killed it? I said, yeah. He said, you skinned it, you gutted it? Yeah. You put it on your sled? Yeah. He said, you're going to go home, you're going to cook it? Yeah. He said, then you're going to eat it? Yeah. He said, then you're doing it right. And, you know, sometimes we think things are so big, but they're not as big as they are. And we have to go and do that. So my life wasn't easy. 5 years old, my mom was going through a tough time. My mom's a beautiful and incredible person, for those of you who know her. And I look up to her tremendously, and she's a really strong, grounded woman. She wrote the song, actually, that I sang when I began talking with you all. But back then, she was going through some struggles. But she realized, or she told me later in my 30s, she said, I felt there was a calling that I was supposed to send you up to Arctic Village to your grandfather and to tell the people there to raise you traditionally. And she said, so that's what I did. I took you and sent you off on a plane at 5 years old. The other side of that story, though, is that my mom was sent at 5 years old out to California to only speak English, only wear a dress, and try to fit into a Western world. And so it's like I got the reverse experience. And my mom felt guilty about that for a lot of years, but in my 30s, I told her, let go of that guilt. I said, that following your, whatever called you to send me up there was the best thing that could have ever happened for me in my life. Because my grandfather was one of the kindest, happiest, good storyteller, couldn't speak much English, but was loved by pretty much everyone I know that knew him. And I got to spend some pretty prominent years with him growing up. He didn't talk to me much the way I'm talking to you, mainly because I couldn't understand Gwich'in well enough. But I realized later in my life that what he passed on to me was how to get along with people, and how to be with people, and how to be respectful and kind. And those are attributes that are just so incredibly important to us as a people. You know, later I realized, oh, that's our cultural values of our people and just how we are. You share, you take care of people, you watch out for everyone else in the community. But anyways, basically separated from my mother and my father by the time I was 5. And what took me many years to realize was that when that happened, I actually shut down myself emotionally. I didn't realize that until much later, about 17. We're jumping ahead in the story a little bit. I got sent around. I lived some in Gwich'in. I lived some in Bashenko. That's what they call Fort Yukon in Arctic Village. I lived even maybe about a year total down in Mountain View and 801 Carlick and Anchorage. And then I got to live down here in South Cushman. And so like a lot of people in my generation, I got exposed to a lot of drug and alcohol abuse. Like I said, I'm down here in South Cushman. I'll tell you, it was like, even though we were living in a city, it was survival. But the difference between survival in the village and survival in South Cushman back then was that in the village we had native food. So I could find some dry meat under someone's sink in a box, or some dried fish, or I could just go out and get something off the land for myself. I remember me and my buddies, I think it was Daryl and Nikolai and Roland Tritt. I remember the first time we got a duck. We didn't have a rifle, we didn't have nothing, we had rocks. And we were on on 2 sides of a creek, and we were hiding in the willows, and these 2 ducks were coming down, and we had a sign to each other when to throw, like that. And so as soon as someone whistled like that, we all threw, and my rock actually broke the wing of one of the ducks. And so I jumped out into that creek, you know, water was splashing around me, and that duck was splashing around trying to get away from me. And finally I grabbed him and wrung out its neck, and man, we ate good. Later I learned it wasn't even the right kind of duck that we hunt. But you know, that's survival. You know, so anyways, down here in South Gwich'in, when my mom first brought me back down here, my mom started she went through her own healing process. And she moved up to Arctic Village for 1 year with me and my little brother. And then she moved us back here to South Gwich'in. And I remember my mom brought me down here to Fairbanks. I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay in Arctic Village, you know. Because it's like, any of you who live in villages or come from villages, at least Arctic anyways, it's true freedom. True freedom. No one to tell us that we can't live the way that our ancestors lived or the way that our grandparents showed us how to live and relate to the land, to the animals, and to each other. And in Arctic, it was such a strong community, the elders that we had back then. Jummus Gilbert, Moses Sam, Isaac Tritt Sr., my grandpa Stephen Peter Sr., David Oley. There was a generation of elders up there that I know those of you who are older know that probably most of your villages had that too, before electricity, before running water. There was none of that in Arctic Village when I moved up there. That didn't come till I was 10 years old. Actually, 10 years old was the first time that I realized that I had a leadership attribute, because all the other little boys in the village would follow me around and do anything. One time we decided we were going to build our own cabin out in the village, outside of the village. And so we got together, about 4 of us. We started salvaging whatever little lumber around the village we could get. We got some hammer. We found any rusty nails we could find. We went out in the woods. We built the floor. And then we got to the part of putting up the cabin. And we're looking, and they're like, what do we do? And I said, I don't know. I think you have to put 4 posts up in each corner. And then once you put the posts up, I said, I think we could put wood across between the 4 posts, and then we could put a roof on. And then somehow I said, we'll figure out how to build some walls. And so we put up the 4 posts. We got 1 log up on top of the 2 posts, and we had no ladder, no nothing. And one guy was standing down below. I think the other guy was trying to stand on top of his back or something, and we were trying to get up there to hammer the nail into the post, and the log fell off and hit one of us on the head. And luckily it didn't get hurt that bad, but we decided after that we weren't ready to build our own cabin. It was caused enough pain to shift ideas. Another, I don't even know if I should admit to this, but when we first got electricity in the village, I was 10 years old, and they put in a generator, they put in the first outlets in the cabins, and we were upstairs in Lillian Garnett's, Lillian doesn't even know this, but we were upstairs in Lillian Garnett's house, and I was there with my cousins, 2 of my cousins, and they had the wall outlet, and we're sitting there, and we're like, I wonder how strong that stuff really is. And I don't know, they're like, hey man, Evon, you better go, you try it out, man, you're the one who always figures things out. And I said, okay. I said, well, I'm pretty sure we need 2 pieces of metal to fit into those holes. And so we found a long metal rod, and we wrapped up some wire around the end of it, and we put 2 prongs. And I went up to it, and they said, all right. They said, go ahead, try it, check it out. And I stuck it in there, and my whole body started shaking. And my cousin said, let go, let go. And I couldn't even say anything. I was like, my hands were stuck to the bar. And they were like, let go, and they were like away from me, of course, because they knew something was going on. And finally it broke, and I was able to let go. And sometimes I think maybe that's why I am the way I am today. Got a little bit too much power running through my system. And later in life I learned that there's a difference between what they call AC, alternating current, which is why all of our electric outlets are AC, because it goes like that, and whenever it hits that middle line, there's a break in the current that allows you to let go. If it was direct current, what they call DC, I'd be gone right now. So luckily it was AC that was in there. But got to grow up through some of that transition anyways, of seeing some of that change happen. Down here at South Gwich'in was when I started to become a teenager. When I first came in, that's where I was at my story. When I first came in, we didn't have a lot of food because we were low income. We had to go to food bank. Man, I really didn't like food bank food. after living in our village, in our villages. And I brought with me a really high-powered BB gun with a scope on it. And when I first got into Fairbanks and South Cushman, I started scoping out or looking around, like what kind of land they got around here, where's the creeks, how do you survive? And I discovered that back behind where the new Chief Andrew Isaac Health Center is now, in between there and the prison, there was a whole bunch of willows, a whole bunch of open land over there, and it was right next to South Cushman. And it turns out no one had hunted there for years. Man, that place was full of what we call dago, which is ptarmigan, it had rabbits, it was good food. So every day I'd be over there with my brother, we'd be pulling out the BB gun. That's when I realized how tough that BB gun was. There was one time this rabbit stuck up its head over a little snow berm, and I was sitting away and I shot and it disappeared, and I thought, oh man, we missed it. And my brother said, well, we better go check it out anyway. So we walked over there and that BB went right through its head completely. It was gone. My mom was always happy. She didn't complain that I was coming home with rabbits and ptarmigan. But then one day I was walking home from a hunt right down 22nd Avenue with my BB gun over my shoulder, and pretty soon I hear the police sirens. I turned around and I was like standing still, and this cop gets out and walks around and he said, what are you doing carrying around a rifle like that? I said, this isn't a rifle. I said, this is a BB gun. But it looked like a 30-06 with a big scope on it. And I said, it's a BB gun. He said, what are you doing? I said, I'm just hunting rabbits and ptarmigan over there. That's the first time I learned about hunting and fishing regulations. And these are all real stories. It's kind of crazy to think back on. But anyways, made the transition. I fell in the same thing that most of our other young Native men, especially South Cushman and other areas, fell into. I fell into drugs, fell into alcohol. I dropped out of high school, and people thought I was a lost cause. And one day, a few things happened. One is there was an accident with some of my friends up on Chena Ridge in a car, and they all got ejected from it, and one of them died. He was 14 years old. The other 3 survived. Around that same time, something clicked in my mind, and I realized that I started asking myself questions like, why are all of our Native people living in South Cushman and struggling with alcohol and drugs, just getting food on the table? And I looked around in Fairbanks and I saw that it seemed like all the non-Native community lived up in the hills, had plenty of food, and seemed happier to me. And I started asking myself questions of why there was that inequity. I started asking, why are so many of our people suffering and hurting inside? And at 17, I realized something that I encourage, this is why I work so much with young people, is that I realized that I had the power to choose the type of life I was going to live. And the first decision I made had nothing to do with alcohol and drugs. It's probably why I stayed away from this conference for so many years. What it had to do with was that I decided that when I became a father, I would be a present, loving, teaching father to my children. That was it. That was the decision I made. Because I realized at 17 that growing up without a strong father in my life put me in a situation where I had to struggle a lot to figure things out for myself. And I wanted to make sure that my children had some of that stability and love and attention and direction, a lot of which I didn't have growing up. And so from that point on, 17 years old till today, standing in front of you, I feel like my life's been like a snowball. And I'm never sure where I'm going to land or where I'm going to end up, but I always trust what my heart is calling me to do. And for the most part, where my work carries me is where I'm invited to go to do the work. Nowadays, the invitations are so many, I can't really even respond to my emails anymore. I got like 1,500 emails I never responded to. I got back and I was just thinking, man, I don't even know what to do with that anymore. But the work is important. The work is valuable. And it's really an honor to be sitting in this crowd with you all. What I see is that we're kind of at you guys have probably been saying this for 31 years, but we're at a really critical moment in where our people are at. We have, in the villages, I've worked in over 50 of our villages around the state now, with many elders. We're in the last generation of people speaking their native language as a first language. Some of the last elders holding on to some of the older songs and practices. We have whole generations of young people in their teens and early 20s who are parents right now that need a lot of support and guidance in how to be parents. Alcohol and substance abuse still is far too prevalent among our people. And when I look out at all that, I really feel like we need a really strong culturally and spiritually based movement to heal our people right now. And it has to be rooted in love and understanding and working together. What I saw as a chief and what I've seen as a leader of many different teams and partnerships and the programs that I've run is that a single person in a community or in a project can pull the whole thing down. You could have great vision and idea in what we're wanting to do, and usually it ends up being that it's tied to that person's ego. They wanted it to go their way rather than like the way that everybody had agreed to it to go, whatever the project was. And so my encouragement, for a lot of you who've been in this work for many years is to be accepting and open of one another and overcome our own egos so that we can work and be together and build something for our younger people and future generations. And that's tough, especially when we get old and wise, right? Because then we think our perspectives is the right perspective. But we need to be able to pull that together. And it's a thing that I think we really need to grow into in the work we're doing.